every time I hear this, I always hear a little bit different things. So what do you got for us, man?
Well, I tell you, Scott, I've been down in Austin doing loans for almost 30 years now, and about 10 years ago started to expand my market to do education, and so I read a lot of books. I've been part of your organization for a long time, and I read this book a couple last year, or this year actually. This was called The One Thing, written by Gary Keller, of course, and Keller Williams is based here, so it's sort of a local popular thing. And I love the book so much, I went ahead and got certified by the company, by Keller Williams International, to teach it. And so I've put together this PowerPoint presentation, which I actually take out to the real estate market and teach realtors on the principles of the one thing. And we're going to do a little condensed portion of that this morning here today.
Awesome. Awesome. Love it, man.
So I wanted to start with just a quote. If I could get my computer here to work.
Here, I'll switch it for you.
There we go. Yeah. So this is a quote not in the book so much, but something I heard years ago. It's called, "Nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come." And it's very similar, in my opinion, to what you guys are doing with Agent Mastermind. Its time has come. It's an idea whose time has come, and it's a growing theme. But the one thing, because of all the noise in our life, I think it's important to start talking about focus. And this is what we're going to be sharing today, a little bit more about the principles here.
Beautiful.
So a couple years ago, I had the opportunity to read a book, which is not really a business book so much as more of a spiritual book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying by Bronnie Ware, who's Bronnie Ware is a hospice nurse in Australia, a palliative care nurse, and over years and years of taking care of people in their last several months of life, I put together kind of a list of things that people found of their regrets.
Muted.
She had the top 5, which are basically, I wish I'd let myself be happier, I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends more, and I wish I had the courage to express feelings, and I wish I hadn't worked so hard. And I think we can all relate to those on some level. So this really spoke to me a couple years ago, and this is part of the process of this one thing. The number one regret was I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself and not the life others expected of me. And I think as lenders or realtors or even business people, our time is so stretched, and sometimes making changes in your life takes courage. It's pretty simple. You do something different, to step outside the box, if you will. So the one thing is really talks about how to position yourself to, make sure that you're doing what's most important. So basically, the one thing, in my opinion, is about living a life, with no regrets. And
Mark, why is it you think that? What do you think is it that keeps people from doing that, from living what they want to live instead of what somebody else wants them to live or expects them to live? What do you like? And I know you and I have had many meetings together, and we share the same philosophy. But a lot of people can't ever get past what other people expect of them and live their own life of what their goals, dreams, and desires are. Do you have any? I know you've probably taught CE class to more than anybody that I've ever met in my life, and maybe more than anybody that I know or out there
in the world.
In the world. So, maybe there's no one answer, but I just thought I would ask you. And there's no right or wrong answer. And
it's a great question, Scotty, and I don't think there is one answer. I think sometimes it's cultural. I think sometimes it's how you're raised, if you will. Sometimes it's just being unconscious, not knowing what it is that you want. And I can look back. I'm 55. I can look back on my life, and I have, I don't have time to talk about my regrets, but they're there. So most of it's trying to make a commitment to live differently, to live more purposefully, if you will. And that's what the one thing's about. A lot of us just, if you will, wing it. In our business, in our personal lives, in our spiritual lives, whatever it is, we don't take time to really find out what's important to us. And down the road, we say, well, I have X, Y, and Z regrets. Nobody can really live without some, but the idea is to live a life, more full. And that's what you guys, you and Carl have preached over the years, which I love. So it's very consistent with what y'all his mantra is. But
excellent, man. Yeah, good answer.
This number here, I throw this number up on the screen, and I always ask the crowd, I say, what does this represent to you? And I get all sorts of different answers, of course. But the fact of the matter is 1440 is the number of minutes we have each day. And so the question is, how are you choosing to live your life minute by minute, if you will? And so we're going to get down to this a little bit further in the presentation, but really focusing on a small, going small, if you will, thinking maybe not minute by minute, but certainly hour by hour. What is it I'm trying to do today? What's the one thing I can be doing to make my life better? So.
And Rose on the call, we were talking about what is the one thing, like what's keeping us from that one thing, and Rose said lack of education, which I would also recommend, would agree with too. So. Well,
I do too. It's a good point. I mean, you have to be aware of different options. You have to be aware of possibilities, if you will. So I love this quote by Mary Oliver, where she says, "So tell me, what is it that you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Spend some time with that. Think about that for the next 30 years."
Right.
I mean, let's face it. We only get one shot at this, and so this is about trying to determine what's important. And we're going to talk about purpose and priorities and all that sort of thing. So, Gordon Keller, he says, so here's the point. The point is, don't average your life. Most of us, Wordsworth says, one of the famous philosophers says, most men, and you could put in women, I guess, live lives of quiet desperation, which means that they don't live to their full potential. So with the one thing, it's about don't average your life. What does it look like to have an extraordinary life? And not just in business, but to relationships and marriage and parenting and, religion or spirituality. And
yeah.
We're going to be looking, not so much in this presentation today, but next week as a follow-up is to break it down and to kind of look at life, set goals around that, which is not, in theory, a new idea, but the way he presents it, I think, is. So he says, well, how do you live a life with no regrets? And it's the same way, to extraordinary results with purpose and priority and productivity. He uses this iceberg
mountain or something. Yeah.
Well,
iceberg, right.
Point, that there's what he calls the 4 Ps. And I've seen the iceberg example used many times, but not quite like this, where what's beneath the water, if you will, the bulk of the iceberg, 90% of it or whatever is below the water that you can't see, and that's who you are internally. That's your
core.
Your core.
Yeah.
Your psychology, your ethics, your integrity, your all of that goes into who you are as a human being. But part of that is discovering, if you will, what your purpose may be. And so you're spending time about, am I in business just to make money, or am I in business to do something else, something bigger, if you will?
Mm-hmm.
And then he finally talks about priorities. And the word priority, which I learned, which is interesting, he said that priority was a word, that a Latin term that meant first. It's the first thing. He said it wasn't until the 19th century, or 20th century, I should say, that we pluralized it to make it priorities. He said there can't be priorities. There's only going to be one priority at a time. I thought, wow.
Interesting. That's a great way to put that. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. He said for 500 years it meant the first thing you're going to do. And then when that thing's completed, then you do the next most important, the next first thing. He said we as Western Americans, we think we can do all sorts of things at the same time, which is kind of crazy. So It's not about priorities. It's about having a priority.
Yeah.
And which produces your productivity, So it's no different than, if you will, putting together a marketing plan. That's whatever it is that you decide to do. Your productivity and your profit, which is what we see top producers, or anybody for that matter, is what they achieve. Their productivity and their profit comes from the things they're doing internally and are prioritizing. So that's kind of what that looks like.
Hey, I got a question mark for the previous slide had 1440 in it, and someone's asking what that meant again.
That means the number of minutes in a day.
Okay, got it. Okay.
We all
Perfect.
have the same. We all have the same time.
Got it.
And
Yeah, isn't that interesting how some people do so much more in one day than most people do in a lifetime? You know what I mean? And it's all about the priority. What do you like? And last week I showed you how to reduce, eliminate, automate, delegate your marketing plan. Like whatever you feel is going to be your number one priority to help you get that next deal or the first deal if you're just starting out.
exactly. Exactly. I'm not a real big, huge World War II buff, but I do like to look at some of the old footage on World War II and the history of it, and what the Americans were able to do from December of 41 after Pearl Harbor up until the time they won, how much they could put together, how much manpower they were able to produce and create in a very short period of time. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
And so, but the key is that they were focused as a team, and they had a goal. Believe me, they had a big purpose. So it makes life a little easier when you have, if you will, a deadline. But that's what the 1444. Now, I love this slide because I think this is what we're challenged by on a daily basis. That you break life into three categories: all the things you could know, all the things you could have, and all the other things you could do. You're only going to have a sliver of those things, okay? These quadrants here. Everything else, this is your life right here. This is the choices you make are pretty much, up until today, your life. And it will be forever and ever. So it's around trying to make choices that are moving you in a direction you want to go. Another author calls it trade-offs. So what am I going to trade off what am I going to not do so that I can choose to do? So your choices are really the core toward achievement, toward living life without regrets, et cetera, et cetera. And I want to read, if I can, something by a famous management guy named Peter Drucker. And I'm just going to read this out of a book because I came across it and it fits right into what we're talking about. Peter Drucker says this: in a few hundred years, when the history of our time will be written from a long-term perspective, it is likely that the most important event historians will see is not technology, not the internet, not e-commerce. It is an unprecedented change in the human condition. For the first time, literally, substantial and rapidly growing numbers of people will have choices. For the first time, they will have to manage themselves, and society is totally unprepared for it. And I see that in my own life, that through technology and the internet and Facebook and Twitter and email, there's so much information coming at us that what scientists have come to conclude that there's a thing called decision fatigue. And decision fatigue is the more choices we are forced to make, the more the quality of our decisions deteriorates. And so they've actually studied this in the last, that's why I say the timing for this is perfect, because in the last 15 years, with all the information that you guys teach on, all the cool tools, that it's hard to kind of, some level stay focused. It's almost like it's more complicated. And so, the more it's called decision fatigue, and I feel that sometimes. I'm thinking, man, if I have to think about one more thing, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Especially all the stuff that we have coming at us on a daily basis, like email and phone and text and Facebook and all the social media sites. It's like family. I mean, like all this stuff coming at us, and then we got to go. All right, well, I gotta be productive, right? I got like what is my like sole purpose today? What do I want to accomplish today? And then you got all this stuff being thrown at us. It's insanity if you let it all in.
It really is. And so the one thing is about prioritizing your time. And you talk about this as well in some of and we'll talk about the Pareto principle as well. But it's taking the time, whether it be an hour or 2 or 3 or 4 a day, to really just spend on something that's important that's going to move you forward, as opposed to returning every text immediately, or looking at Facebook posts and all that sort of thing. So most of that is noise and a distraction. My example I use in my class is I have 4 grandchildren. My wife the other day says, I want you to go to the store and buy some chips. And, we don't really have chips around our house, Lay's potato chips,
Yes.
And so I go down the chip aisle, and when I was a kid, you had Lay's and you had Cheetos. That was it.
Right.
Now, there's like 20 yards of options, and I'm thinking, what am I supposed to be getting here? And I stood there for like 10 minutes, and it's a minor example, but it's just so many more options these days than in the past. And there's another psychology issue called learned helplessness, and that I studied a little bit through this process. And it was really scientific. It was about some scientists back in the 60s who did experiments with German Shepherds. And the way it worked was they would take German Shepherds and they would place them in a box in three different. They split them in three different groups. And the first group of German Shepherds were in a box, and they would be shocked for a period of time. But in that box, they had a lever they could actually push down to make the shock go away, and they learned how to do that. So if a shock would come, they learned that they could push this lever, and that shock would go away. The second group had the same situation, but they made the lever not work. So that even though they tried it, it didn't work. And the third group of dogs were in the box by themselves with no shock at all. So the experiment went on to say that they put them in a box with a small partition, the same groups in the same order. The first group, it was the same sort of thing, but there was a partition in the middle where they could just step over. Where the shock came, there was no lever, but they could just step over to the other side where there was no shock. The group that had no shock learned quickly just to step over. Okay, but the dogs whose lever was broken, they just stayed there because they didn't think they had a choice because the lever was broken before, so they never even moved. And so, learned helplessness is where the other side of that is that if we don't feel we have a choice to do something, then we'll just shut down. Primarily, we'll just quit, and that happens a lot of times in the market. When the market corrected back in 2008, 2009, I had lots of friends, loan officers, just quit. They said, "Well, the party's over. There's nowhere to go, so we're just going to get out." But some of us who are still around said, "Well, we just need to change how we do business. We need to learn."
Well, on the flip side too, if I see it a lot where people we'll have we've done this on stage before, and you might have even seen it. We'll line 5 people up, and we'll give each person a 20, and we'll hand them 100. They'll hand us a 20, and we'll give them back 100. So 4 in a row. Yes, it works. Yes, it works. Yes, it works. Yes, it works. And the 5th person, we go, "Nope, I'm not going to do it." What do you mean you're not going to do it? We just seen 4 people do it. No, it's not going to work for me. You know what I mean? Right? And so on the other hand of that, somebody tries something. For example, say you send to your past database, and you send to your past database something really cool, and you only get 3 opens. You're like, man, that's failure, right? You're like, okay, I'm not going to. To yourself, you feel that's failure. So you go, I'm not going to do that again because that kind of hurt. I can't believe all these people that know, like, and trust me, only 3 of them opened my email. So you take it personal, and then you stop doing it, where that's 3 more people. Instead of looking at it like that's 3 more people that opened my email than if I'd never sent the email.
Yeah. That's
what I'm saying?
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Because a lot of us are focused on what doesn't work as opposed to what's working.
Well, the other thing too is we'll I mean, and I know you've had this. You be in a room of 50 people, and 49 people are cheering, going, "I love you, Mark. You're awesome." And there's one in the back of the room going, "Mark, you suck. I can't believe you're showing us this crap." And you're focused on the one person trying to fix that person. "Oh my God, I can't believe I'm a failure." But 49 people are cheering, and one person's going, "Oh my God, this is terrible." And we focus on the one that thinks it's terrible, instead of the 49 that thinks, "Oh my God, you're awesome." And so that's just a learned helplessness. Flip the switch, focus on the fans, let the other. There's always going to be somebody that doesn't like you, or doesn't work with you, or says no, or doesn't agree with your core, you've talked about, and it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of that comes from childhood stuff that we're just not clear about, but it's very, very true.
Right.
this idea of learned helplessness is sort of pitiful, but it's universal too on some level.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So, it's really something to think about. But I think your analogy is perfect when it comes to, you're not going to win over everybody, not every customer, not every realtor if you're trying to, sell your mortgage services, et cetera, but focus on the wins.
Right.
So that goes back to this thing, and Keller Williams, I'm sort of tied in with those guys here locally, and they have a thing called BOLD, B-O-L-D, and they have BOLD laws. BOLD stands for Business Objective Life by Design. And so this is just one of the BOLD laws. They have several. Change your thinking and change your world. So one of the things you've done for me over the last several years is helped me with my mindset and changing your thinking, not just with strategies, but how I view things. So I just want to throw that out there to you, Scotty, because that's
thank you, brother. Appreciate that, man.
That's been huge, and
yep.
through the classes you're putting on otherwise.
And I probably swiped that from somebody else and shared it with you, so I can't take all the credit. I tell you, man, I firmly believe you are who you hang around, and I see posts all the time like about there, and you hang around 4 poor people and you soon be the 5th. You hang around 4 successful people and you'll soon be the 5th. So you are who you hang around, and you hang around like-minded people who are positive and upbeat and always thinking outside the box. It's contagious.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what I'm doing, is just being around people like you and others who just want to get on with it,
Right.
And I learned this term years ago from Robert Kiyosaki, from Rich Dad Poor Dad, who used to go around and do seminars, live seminars.
Love that guy. Yep.
Paradigm shift, which is basically a fundamental change in our approach or underlying assumptions in the way that you think. And it kind of goes back to my conversation a minute ago about how many, I knew dozens of really pretty talented loan officers back in 08, 09, just say, hey, my paradigm is business is the old way. And I can't seem to shift out of that. They didn't say that verbally, but that's kind of what they were thinking,
Yeah.
Same thing with these new TRID rules that came out last Saturday. It's just another fundamental change in our industry we better adopt quickly, or it's going to be a big challenge. So again, I like the word paradigm shift. We all have a certain paradigm. A paradigm is really just the way you look at life or look at something. And to be more effective or to make changes, you have to shift out of that into a different way of processing information primarily. And this is just a quote from one of my heroes, M. Scott Peck. So a lot of this is around courage. Courage is not the absence of fear. He actually goes on to say courage, it's not the absence of fear. The absence of fear is some sort of brain damage. But it's really the making of action in spite of the fear. So, when I first started teaching, I didn't like standing up in front of a room. I wasn't very comfortable talking in front of a group. But I said, well,
oh my God, it was horrible. Yeah.
it's like
horrible.
It's like that, And but then once you have the courage to do it a few times, then it gets easier and easier, and then it becomes natural. So a lot of this is also about building habits. So and we're not here to talk about teaching, but that's just one of my examples. And then I have this slide on success, and they say, well, let's define what that means. And I get all sorts of the ideas or responses from the agents in the room or whoever's in the room about what success means. Anything from living a good life to raising your children to giving back to the society. All sorts of things. They're all true. They're all good. But,
sure, absolutely.
One thing that Keller talks about in the book is that by their definition, I'm just going to use their definition, and he says that success is getting what you want. And I'm bolded what you want because there's 2 optimal words there. Number 1 is you, not somebody else.
Right.
Not your boss or even your customer on some level. What is it that you want? And then the other thing is want. You got to know what it is that you want. And so when I'm looking at my life, and he breaks it down into 6 or 7 categories: spirituality, key relationships, business, finances, et cetera, et cetera. So in each category, you have to be very, very clear about what is it you want in order for you to even have an attempt at getting it. And so this part right here is, the next slide is really about what he calls a geometric domino progression. And this is sort of the basis almost for the whole book.
Mark, going back to the what you want, it's funny that for a lot of people, it is really hard to, when I say, because I ask this question literally 4 or 5 times a day to different people I talk to, and sometimes more, and I say, hey, if you had to wake up tomorrow morning, what would you want your business to look like? It's not, you know what I mean? It's like what, okay, and then now what do we have to do to make that happen? And most people go, I want to help more people get into homes. Like, that's not what I know that's what you want to do, but what, like, for you, really, really going deep with what you want to accomplish in your life, and then just working backwards. And it's actually, it's the hardest thing you'll do, but it's also the most gratifying thing you'll do, because once you figure it out and you really go deep with what you really want out of life and where you want to be in 5 years or where you want to be in a year, or, then you can just work backwards and go, okay, what do I got to do in 90 days to make the 12-month congruent? What do I got to do in 2 weeks to make the 90-day congruent with the 12 months? And
that's right.
But it's the hardest thing. It's like, it's not about helping other. Like, what do you want? So I mean, that's a tough question, and most people can't answer it, and most people can't, like, they give me an answer, but it's about other people, and it's not, so it's really it's funny how the average and probably most people want something for other people, and they don't know what they want for themselves.
Yeah, and that's a great truth right there. When you look at your business model, what do you want your business to look like? Besides just make another sale or make another commission or whatever.
Right.
How are you going to leverage it? How are you going to build a business that works for you?
Right.
That's really the goal.
Absolutely.
Same thing with health and everything else. I went to the doctor yesterday or last week, and my cholesterol is a little high. Okay, so I want that down. So I've got to make some changes in what I put in my body. Number one,
Yeah.
I got to lose a little bit of weight, 20 or 30, maybe 100 pounds. No.
That's right. You're not that big, man.
But I don't want to check out, over the next 10, 15 years.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
So it boils down to lots of different elements, not just your business. But getting back to these dominoes, there was a scientist back in actually a physicist back in Britain in 1983 named Loren Whitehead. And Loren Whitehead did a study, if you will. He was a physicist on dominoes. And what he concluded was that, of course, when we were kids, we all grew up with those little dominoes, and we'd stack them over, and we would push one down, and, they all fell down. It was always kind of fun. Matter of fact, the world record for most consecutive dominoes, Scott, just a little FYI, is 4.5 million. Okay?
Oh my God! Okay, wow, wow.
Little pivot you may want to know about.
All right.
But the point is, what Whitehead discovered was a 2-inch domino had the capacity or the energy, if you will, to knock over a domino 50% larger, or a 3-inch domino. And a 3-inch domino had the potential of energy to knock over a 4.5-inch domino. Okay, and so this is just a progressive diagram of what that would look like. So this is your very first domino, 2 inches tall. So by the 18th domino, it's tall enough to knock over the Leaning Tower of Pisa, which is also already leaning, so it's a little bit easier. No, I'm just kidding. The 23rd domino is tall enough to knock over, the Eiffel Tower. The 31st, the Mount Everest. And by the 57th domino, it grows exponentially to almost be tall enough, if you will, to knock over the moon. So when they say shoot for the moon, they're not kidding. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like when you double a penny every day for 31 days. It's like $10 million. So it's progressively going higher and higher. So what Keller and Papasan talk about is that extraordinary success is sequential. It's not simultaneous. It's doing one thing at a time. Knock over in the first domino, then go to the next one. Now, what you said a minute ago is exactly right. You take a goal, let's say a 5-year goal or a 1-year goal, and you break it down over time, backwards, if you will, and you got to start somewhere. Yep. Let's say today.
Yep.
So that goes more into goal setting and planning. We're not going to talk about so much today. This is more of the principles. But the idea, of course, is to determine on a day-by-day basis or week-by-week basis, certainly, what's the most important thing I can do today.
You know what's funny? You know what's funny about that, brother? Is like, this is kind of go back to that one slide, just one back, where it says extraordinary success, sequential, not something. So it's one thing at a time. So here's what's really funny about that is I will talk to somebody, and this is a direct conversation I had with somebody, almost word for word. So a buddy of mine, I won't say any names, calls me up and says, Scotty, man, like the last 6 months have been the best 6 months of my career. I've made more money in the last 6 months than I've ever made in my life. I don't even know, quadrupled 5 times, 6 times my income since I started with you in January. Right. And then he goes, but I was on this webinar yesterday, and they were doing this one thing. And I just thought I'd call you and get your opinion on it. And I go, let me just reverse that conversation. So and I'll just, Mark, I'll use you. I'll go, Mark, so you just told me that you've literally grown your income to the highest it's ever been in your life. And I know what you've been doing. You've been doing this one thing to make that happen. So now what you're telling me is you're going to stop doing the one thing that's got you to where you're at, and you're going to go try something else that you don't know whether it'll work or not.
Right.
What should you do?
That's
and
insane.
so, like, and where I'm going with that is when you find something that I think that it's part of our DNA, part of our core, is we get bored. We get bored with success.
Right.
Like, we chase shiny whistles. We chase, like, man, you know what? I called 100 of my past database and got 4 new deals. Right. That's no fun anymore. Right? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So then I go, all right, well, what if someone else calls my past database because I know it works? Will it work as good? Will it work 80% as good? Or shoot, maybe it'll work even better. Right. And I can go do something that I want to do that may be fun today. And like, so when I guess where I'm going with this is everybody on this call knows what works. Right. And if you just get bored with it, or you go, you know what, I gotta stop, and whatever got me to where I'm at right now, and I gotta stop because I gotta take care of the business that I have, right, that I built up to. Why not hire somebody to do the middle part? Like we talk about a roller coaster, like we're going up on this roller coaster, and when we get to the top, we're like, oh my God, I got all this business. Now I gotta stop, and then I go down. And I go, all right, I have a great month and a bad month, and a great month and a bad month. Why not put someone in place to help me once I get to the top of the roller coaster? Now they just take over, and I keep going. The roller coaster never ends. Going up. You know what I'm saying? Isn't that funny when you think about that, though? Like we find something that works, then we stop doing it. Well, it's actually kind of sad, and I'll give you a personal example of that, and this is kind of embarrassing, but I'm going to share it anyway because nobody can see me. But back in 2008, when things were bad, in 2009, I decided to change my model, so I started to teach a lot with these seed courses. And I was the first lender in town to teach, and I was teaching all the time. That was my one thing, And I had courses approved. I had taught thousands of realtors, and my business exploded. Yeah. And then it got to where I thought, well, I can get rid of I didn't say this to myself, but I quit doing that. And I thought, and then after a while, I'm thinking, well, it's different. My business is different. And so now I'm starting back on teaching again as part of my bigger model because that's the one thing that worked for me, and I quit doing it one time because it kind of got boring. Yeah. Yeah. But now I've got new material. You got bored with it. You're like, oh, that works. Let's go find something else that excites me now. It's like, it's so weird. It's so weird. I'm like, that is insane, Mark. But anyway, I just share that little bit of trivia, but so the BOLD law is focused on the plan, not the problem. Anytime you put together a business plan, it's not going to go perfectly, but the key is to make sure that you have accountability and support with your team or a coach like yourself, but to focus on the plan. And what Taylor talks about is your consciousness, or your conscious is your goal setter, but your unconscious is your goal getter, and that's part of the training of building habits over time. An example of a habit for me would be education and teaching. Standing up in front of a room, whether it be 10 people or 100 people, it's all the same. It's a habit to me, and I can do it very easily, very comfortably, because I've done it so many times. But I had to shift my thinking around that because when I was
several years ago, I thought, well, I don't feel comfortable doing that. But once I made the conscious decision to do it, then it became part of who I am. And so the problem at one point in my life was I didn't feel comfortable talking in front of groups. So I said, well, I've got to get over that. And when I did, then things changed.
Very cool.
So Keller spends some time also in the book talking about the lies. And he identifies, we don't have time today to go through the 6 lies, but he puts together a list of 6 lies. And we're going to talk a little bit about just one of them. But he says the 6 lies between you and success are that everything matters equally, which of course doesn't. Multitasking, he says, is a lie. You know, a disciplined life. We all think we need to have a disciplined life, where he says you really need to build habit as opposed to just being disciplined. You know, that willpower is always on will call, that I can always perform my highest, which isn't, of course, true. You know, a balanced life, and we all talk about a balanced life, but the fact is there's a lot more to the conversation. But, you know, your work and your home life are two different situations, 2 different animals. And big is bad, which really is big is hard. You know, to go big is too hard, so I'm not even going to try. But I do want to spend a little bit of time on the first one, that everything matters equally. And so this is a big aha to me. He says, you know, that not everything matters equally, and success isn't a game won by whoever does the most. Yet that's exactly how most play it on a daily basis. You know, that I need to get all these things done. And so Gary Keller and Jay Papasan, the authors, would contend that it's not so much how much you get done in a day or the week, it's that what's the most important thing to do. And Gary talks about this when he was coaching top producing realtors back in the day, that he would give them, you know, homework, if you will. He would be accountable, their accountability coach, and that he'd give them 3 things to do that week. And he said most of the time they never finished the 3 things. So after a while he said, well, just do these 2 things, the most important 2 things you can do. And half the time they'd get that done. He said, finally, kind of out of frustration, I got to the point where I said, look, just decide the most important thing to do this week. And then that's all they had to focus on, you know? And sometimes that's easier said than done as far as identifying that, but that's the basis for, I think, success as well, you know?
Well, I've actually taken that a step further. It's like, okay, I know that I want to accomplish these 10 things, but do I personally have to do any of them? Right? I mean, that's the question. Like, I know that, I mean, okay, and then I go, all right, well, maybe this one thing needs to get done, but do I even have to do that? Because I know I've singled out that this is the highest money making activity that I could possibly do.
Yeah.
I farm that out. I'm like, okay, can I find somebody that can do it as good, or you know what? I found someone that does it as good as me, and now I do even higher money-making activity, so the results are going to be even crazier, right? So, like, you really got to think about that. And everybody goes, you know what? No one – and most of the time, if you check your ego at the door and go – a lot of people tell me, well, nobody can do that as good as me.
Right.
And I'm like, man, I would beg to differ, because I don't know if that's your highest money-making activity that you should be doing right now.
Yeah.
And so that's the challenge that people play with themselves. Like, nope, you know, and I think they say that to feel like they're worthy or they're doing something, not necessarily like they have to do it. But if I don't do that, what the heck am I going to do? Right.
Right. Well, that's a great example, Scott. You know, and that's the highest level of leverage, when you can, you know, have somebody else do the work for you. Obviously.
I know. You know it's going to get done.
Yeah.
Right.
You have to hold them accountable, but it frees you up to do a lot of the things. And of course, if you study the top producers, whether it be realtors or mortgage lenders in our world, most of them have that down. You know, they've built teams around them that handle a lot of the day-to-day work that goes into all the work that we have to do.
Right on.
Basically, achievers always work from a clear sense of priority. And that really simply boils down to what's the most important thing. I keep going back to this one thing, priority being the first thing, not priorities. You can't have a whole list of priorities. You can only have one. And so, and then there's trade-offs, like, doing this workshop today. This was a priority for me. I wanted to share the information with people, and I made it a priority. So that's what I'm doing with this hour of my day today.
Yep.
And so this is a guy named Greg McKeown, who's a British author. Another great book I want to share with you is called Essentialisms. I should have written that down, but I didn't. It's called Essentialisms by Greg McKeown. And I love this quote. He says, if you don't prioritize your life, someone else
will. Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
And that's, I think what's most of us being entrepreneurs or self-employed, we didn't want to go, work for somebody. I've never worked for anybody since I was a teenager. Where I'm clocking in, because they will prioritize your life. But my example with sometimes realtors is their customers, or sometimes lenders too. The customer prioritizes their life. Not that you shouldn't focus on service, but after a while there has to be a balance between relationship, between what's important to you personally as opposed to just what other people want. Yeah, right on. So, Gary talks about, instead of a to-do list, we all have to-do lists. I say most all of us have some level of to-do list every day. We sit down and we write down the things we're going to do that day. He says you need to have a success list that is purposely created around extraordinary results. And so he said the thing about a to-do list, and I'm guilty of it myself. I mean, I was guilty of it last week. He said you write down things you need to do, and the first thing you write down is the first thing that comes to your mind. It may or may not be the most important thing. It's just the first thing that you think about. He said, so the key is to write your to-do list and then mark out what your should-do list.
Got it.
Because that's your success list. Okay?
Love it.
Because there's a lot of things we could do, and half the time, like you're saying, Scott, that you give a lot of that to other people to do. It could be an assistant. It could be a partner or whatever. I give all that to my wife. No, I'm just kidding.
Right.
But as far as working toward a goal, it's really important to be able to itemize, if you will, or to pinpoint what you should be doing as opposed to what you could be doing. And that's again a habit forming. It's a lot harder. Going back to Pareto's principle we talked about earlier. Pareto was an Italian economist back in the 18th century who had done some research on the wealth distribution in Italy back in those days, and he said that on average 20% of the people in Italy at the time owned 80% of the land. So they were the 20% had the most wealth in the country at that time. And years of study around this principle have come to the same sort of agreement when it comes to business, as an example, or other things. And y'all talk about this. I know it's
it's everything. I mean, 20% of the fish are in 80% of the water. 20% of the roads are traveled by 80% of the people. Like every single thing you can think of is 80-20.
Exactly. And the same thing. They've even looked at it in manufacturing companies. 80% of the problems come from 20% of the breakdowns.
Absolutely. And I actually said that wrong. 80% of the fish are in 20% of the water.
There you go.
Backwards.
You got a little water up there in Michigan. So what Gary Keller has done, and I love this because this is challenging, but he said, and I'm quoting out of the book almost, but Gary Keller talks about when he was building his company, which is now Keller Williams is the largest real estate company in the world as far as number of agents. And I've known this company since back in the mid-'80s when they had one little office for 40 people. Now they have 120,000 agents around the world.
Wow.
And he said back in the 90s, we were not struggling, but we weren't growing at the pace we wanted to grow. And he says, so I brought my management team in for a day or two, and we wrote down just a big old, what he called a brain dump or brainstorm or whatever you want to call it, on things we can do differently as a company to change our trajectory. And he said at one point they had 100 different ideas. He did what they call extreme creative. They take those 100 ideas and they took the top 20% of that. And then they took the top 20% of that until they had one thing that they thought was the most important thing. which is the year 2000, Gary wrote a book called The Millionaire Real Estate Agent.
Great book, by the way. Yeah.
That's a great book. And he said the one thing he just determined in this extreme credo was, I need to write a book. So he basically stepped down running the day-to-day operations, hired some more competent people to him to take over the company. He wrote the book, and the business exploded. It's really quite a great story, but he talks about extreme credo, really getting small on the most important thing that you need to be doing.
Yep.
And so, this is just another quote from Jim Rohn, that success leaves clues. And Og Mandino said it like this: it is those who concentrate on but one thing at a time who advance in this world. And so the idea of all things being equal is just a lie, what Gary Keller calls a lie. And success leaves clues in the sense that, through coaching companies like yourself or there's a lot of opportunities to go study, if you will, successful people and what have they done. I don't care if it's reading Think and Grow Rich as an example, what he did back in the day, or looking out in your own marketplace and seeing who's doing something that maybe I can emulate.
Copy, yeah.
Copy. Let's face it. There's a lot of great information out there.
What's funny is Carl brought this up, and he got this from his son, it was profound, and I think you've heard it, where he said, everyone's equal until someone makes a decision.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth?
Because if we're equal, we're standing in a line, and I make a decision, I move forward, you're not equal anymore.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like, it's like that one thing that you decide to do, you're no longer equal with whoever else. So it's profound.
I should put that slide. That's a great slide. Yeah. Everybody's equal until somebody makes a decision.
Absolutely. And,
so basically, to kind of wrap this thing up, I want to leave just a kind of short little list of big ideas. That less is better. It's not so much more is better. Less but better, I should say. Doing fewer things maybe, but being the best you can be at those things. Most of us, like you mentioned earlier, we're really attracted to shiny objects.
Yeah.
And saying, well, I'm going to try that, or I'm going to try that, and you never do anything particularly well.
Right.
So the big idea was find one or two things that you can actually master. If you need help, there's a lot of people that can help you out there.
Absolutely.
Again, it's not about getting more things done. It's about getting the right things done, which is sort of a repetitious mantra here. And finally, ask yourself, which problem do I want to solve? I would assume that everybody on the call today has some level of problem or challenge in their life. And which one do I really want to tackle first? It could be lead generation. It could be, budgeting. It could be health. It could be a lot of different things. But, which problem do I currently want to solve? So those are kind of the big ideas from this little session. I just wanted to throw that out.
I love it, man. Yeah, I love it. One of the things I got is one of the things that kind of went through the whole presentation was the one thing. And I think people try to focus on too much. And, you brought it up. You kind of threw me under the bus by saying Agent Mastermind has done this for 3 years now. And it's the truth, though, because I don't know what that one thing is for you, and neither do you, Mark. We don't know what you're gonna sit in on a class and go, oh my God, like that's it. That is my one thing, and I'm going to do that, and because that's what I love to do, and that's where finding what that is that drives your passion, drives your economic engine, and gets you up in the morning, keeps you up late at night with like, oh, I can't believe I get to do this, and I get to build relationships, and I get to help people, and I get to get people into homes, and I get to help their friends and family and coworkers, like whatever that one thing is, and then I get to live an awesome life of freedom and coolness.
Right.
Whatever that one, like maybe it's video marketing is one, and
sure,
getting out of your inbox might be another, and saving an hour so you can go home an hour earlier at night because you're trying to like a lot of people, like there's so many things we could talk about, but like finding that one thing, that's why we do different classes all the time, and I think this kind of this is great for like of the end of the year thing where like we could start 2016 fresh. Start now with carving out what we really should be doing or what we really want to accomplish or that problem we want to solve. Dude, I love hearing. I don't think you can hear this stuff enough. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree.
Like, because no matter what level you're at, no matter how much you're doing or how much you're not doing, this is for everybody, and that's why I love this. I love what you do, man, and I appreciate everything you do. I know you're owner of Mortgage IQ, so if you guys are anywhere in the Texas area and you have you hear Mortgage IQ or Mark Hairston come up and he's doing a CE class, I'd highly recommend, because he does throw his passion into it, and that's what he's truly passionate about is doing the CE stuff. But it's stuff like this that I believe this is a part of, or bits and pieces of a CE class that you teach. And I appreciate you bringing it to the Agent Mastermind series, man. I appreciate you being part of our team, man.
Well, you're welcome. And just hanging out with people like you have really, like I said earlier, changed my paradigm and changed my thought process about things. So this is just a continuation of growth around. A lot of times it's just mindset, and talking about success. What is it that you really want? Really being clear about that.
Yep, absolutely.
And so one thing is to master the one thing,
Master the one thing, man. And then after the one thing's mastered, what's the next one thing? Like one thing at a time. So good stuff. Let me make sure there's no questions. Could you repeat what the previous mention of the book? Okay, there it is, right there. I have the book. There's a book on the. Okay, it's not on it. I checked the Audible, and it's not on Audible yet. So.
It's not. I know it's on CD.
Nope.
It may not be on Audible.
Oh, it is on CD? Okay, cool. Awesome, brother. Hey, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I know you're busy. I know you're going to be on next week. We're going to do a continuation of this in a different manner, and I appreciate that, brother. And you have no idea how much I appreciate you helping the people. And if one person gets one thing out of today's class, it would be, we've accomplished our job in helping one person have a better life. So I appreciate that, man.
My number, if anyone wants to give me a call, I'll be happy to do that.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
so my direct line, if anybody wants to chat further, it's 512-789-6967. I have no way of putting that up.
Yeah, no worries. If you want to change, you know what? Here, let me just, be careful with putting your number out there, man, because, you know how that goes. Let me just do this. All right, let's do, so, let me just do this. You want me to just throw it up here?
Yeah, throw it up there. 512.
Insert word, 1 second. Okay, 512.
789.
789.
6967.
6967. All right, brother.
All right, Scotty.
There you go, man. Thank you so much. I'll see you at the same time, same place next week on Agent Mastermind. And, Mark, look forward to more good stuff, man. Thanks so much. Everybody have a great day. Be safe, and pick one thing and go for it. Focus on it, and then delegate it out.
There you go.
All right, brother. Thanks so much, brother. Appreciate you, man. See you next week. Bye-bye.